Bad communication is not the problem. Today on the Dailiest Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
It's pretty bad when you start laughing before you even start speaking. All right, welcome everybody to the Dailiest Show. It's good to see you, Mark Dolfini. This is a show not just for rental housing providers, but anybody looking to get a little bit more white space on your calendar. You can actually stand it long enough to listen while I break up on my own. So I don't even know why that was particularly funny, but anyway, today we're talking about bad communication is not the problem. I think that's what I was having trouble saying. Bad communication is not the problem. How ironic is that? I think that's why I left. But oftentimes, whenever I'm working with folks who are having issues with businesses, and a lot of times I get people who are saying, "Hey, I've got a problem with a rental housing provider, whether that's a landlord, individual landlord, or property manager, whatever else it is, realtor, CPA, whatever that is." One of the things when I often hear that they're trying to think about, or in the process of considering hiring a different person, whatever that is, almost universally, if it's not related to something that they're doing particularly wrong. But one of the things that I hear almost universally is that they have bad communication, that they don't communicate well. And why I think that's important is that they think that bad communication is the problem. Well, let me back into this here a little bit. I would argue that bad communication in and of itself generally is not the problem. It is usually the symptom of a much, much larger problem. Now, follow with me on this analogy here for just a second. So, for those of you who are out there and seeing this show for the first time, give me a shout out, say hello. For those of you who have seen this show many times before, just go ahead and say where you're at and why you're watching, and be sure to hashtag whether you're watching this live or replay. It's nice to know. But and I know this is being broadcast on all sorts of different social media, so it's always good to hear from you folks. But anyway, what in terms of the bad communication being a symptom of a larger problem. Now, here, many of us have, most of us who've watched this, if not all of us, have eaten at a restaurant and had bad service. So let's say that you got sat down and for whatever reason no one's showing up. You don't even have your menus. You don't even have glasses of water on your table, nothing. And I would argue at that point in time, now you might be saying it's a service issue, right? I mean, realistically, it's not. You're actually having a communication problem, right? Because you can't communicate your order to the kitchen, or you can't communicate with anybody, right? You might think it's a communication issue fundamentally. It's actually not. It's actually an infrastructure and process problem. So let's go back to the VIP method here just for a second and talk through that. Remember, vision is what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Infrastructure is the bones of the business. It's the desks, the chairs, just the simple infrastructure. It could be software, it could be whatever it is. And then the processes is how you do stuff, right? That's the processes that do all that. I would argue that if you are trying to communicate your order to the kitchen, that there's no infrastructure, meaning that there's no automated way to do that, right? So if there's no automated way to do that, through whether that's through an app or through, hollering in through a speaker or whatever that is, right? You're sitting at a table with no methodology of doing that. That's an infrastructure problem. A process problem means that, okay, well, if they don't have an infrastructure for you to put your order in directly into the kitchen, then there has to be a server that comes up that takes your order from you. That's process. So the process and infrastructure, that's your system. Again, if the problem is not being able to communicate your order to the kitchen, then it's really not a communication problem, is it? It's really an infrastructure and or a process problem. One of those two things, probably both, is lacking. So let's go back into other aspects of business, whether, again, many people say, well, they just don't communicate. Well, again, I would argue that that's not a communication problem. It's a problem of infrastructure or process. If you're not building an infrastructure, again, let's say for argument's sake that this is your particular business. And if your vision, as I've used this analogy many times and I'll use it again, if your vision is to lay on the beach rubbing cocoa butter on your belly for 2 months out of the year in Spain, right? That's a fine vision. But if you created an infrastructure where you have to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner while you're trying to lay on the beach, that's going to be a terrible experience for you, right? So again, if you don't return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, what are they going to say? Oh, they don't communicate, or it takes them forever to get back, or whatever the issue is, right? It's a communication issue. It's not. It's actually either an infrastructure or process problem. Now, I would argue that if you're trying to build an infrastructure out where you do have to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, but you put a process in place where someone else is intercepting those emails and someone else is intercepting those phone calls so you don't have to do it, then you have a good system in place, right? So all I'm saying is that don't just think the communication problem is the only problem. In almost every and again, there's always going to be different scenarios where that isn't the case, where just people are just bad at communicating because they don't check their messages or whatever else it is. I personally do not turn on the notifications for my text messages or my messengers or anything else like that, because it drives me bananas, because it's a constant source of distraction. So I turned it off. The only way my phone makes noise is actually on the ringtone, and it helps me stay focused throughout the day and actually get the things done rather than checking my phone every 15 seconds every time it makes some sort of burping noise. So all I'm saying for you is that in most instances, when people talk about there being a bad communication issue, it's almost related to infrastructure, either bad infrastructure or bad process, or non-existent infrastructure or a non-existent process. So that's where you need to work on it. Now, how do you fix this? Well, first and foremost, work on your infrastructure first. Don't try to hire somebody. Don't try to put something in place with no infrastructure. Again, it would be like, if, let's say for argument's sake, that your phone system looks like this, right? For argument's sake. And if your phone system looks like this, well, how then what are you supposed to forward your calls to? If that's your phone system, are you going to have someone literally walk around with you and answer your phone for you? I mean, that sounds cool maybe, but that's not that's not sustainable. So then if you had let's pretend you had a phone system where actually people called in, whether that's a voice over IP phone, a virtual phone, Google Voice, whatever, I don't really care. You can use Grasshopper, you can use lots of different phone systems out there, Ring Central, all sorts of different possibilities. So if you've got someone else calling it, where that phone call gets forwarded to someone else where they can answer it, that's a phone system. You've got infrastructure, you've got process. Make sense? All right. So imagine all these different aspects of how you can have people working for you. Whether that's the infrastructure would be the website, and then the process would be a virtual assistant managing all the things through the website. That might be taking orders. That might be taking managing your work orders through your maintenance work orders, maintenance requests, things like that. So this is what I'm talking about, but you have to build the infrastructure first, and then you put the process in place after the fact. And that is all I have today. So yes, if I'm looking like I got fried this weekend, I did. And it was literally the best weekend ever. I literally had such a great weekend. Good time hanging out with the in-laws at the pool, and went kayaking for a little while. Had some kayak therapy. So any kayakers out there? I don't know if anybody else. I mean, I didn't see anybody else on the water. I don't know anybody else out there that listens to this show that's into kayaking. But anyway, that's all I have for today, folks. Please be sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. Most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you next time.